Hello and welcome, this is Dr. Victor. In this special video, I am going to continue with the creation of a 3D model of a popular magnetic fidget slider toy, so you can make them for yourself or as gifts for others. Let's begin. In the previous video, we have created the basic shapes, including the base and the cover for this fidget slider. But the cover was a little bit plain, so here we are going to create a fancier one. First, let's do a quick recap on the dimensions of a fidget slider. We started with the 6 by 1.2 millimeter disc magnets, and from there we created a 30 by 54 millimeter model with a thickness of 5 millimeter. Just you can see the dimensions over here. This also gives us a cover of 3.5 millimeter thick, so 3.5 over here. Now the fancier cover that we are going to make today here is, it has two parts, the bottom part and also the pattern part. And we want the pattern to be 1 millimeter thick, which leaves the bottom part to be 2.5 millimeter thick. So to help us with that, let's create a second node over here. And we're going to write down the dimensions we want. So here we have our 3.5 millimeter thick of fancy cover. And within this cover, we have start with our 2.5 bottom part, or bottom piece, and this leaves us the 1 millimeter pattern part over here. Right. So this is our plan. We will then use our original cover model as a guide and create a few duplicates of this cover. And we'll use one of them as what we call a stencil as well. So let's go to the top view. Let's move this aside. To help us to better keep a record of them, I'm actually going to keep one more duplicate just in case I want to create another fancier pattern cover. So I'm going to click or press Ctrl D and move it aside. This is one of our pieces. This will form our bottom piece. We're going to press Ctrl D again, and this is going to be our stencil part. Right. In terms of thickness, if we refer to this guide, we're going to make one of these. Let's make this one the bottom. So the bottom piece is going to be 2.5 millimeters thick. Right. For the pattern part, we can start with 1, but I'm going to actually make it 1.5 millimeter thick. And I'll explain why this is the case a little bit later. But let's use this number. So again, our bottom piece is going to be 2.5 millimeter thick, and our pattern piece is going to be 1.5 millimeter thick. Now the height right now or above the work plane doesn't really matter, so let's just keep it that way. We'll play with that a little bit later on. With these two pieces there, we are going to find a pattern. So let's go to our right hand side, the library, and let's find our pattern. So the exact pattern that I use for the little toy that I made on the cover image, I found it using the keyword grid. So I go to the magnifying glass, type grid, and then press enter. Wait for a little bit for it to show up. There we go. Now, so you can see that there's a bunch of patterns that we can choose from and experiment with. Right now, we're going to use what I use. So I'm going to use this hexagonal shape pattern. Once you drag onto the work plane, you can see that there are a few parameters you can set. We are going to keep most of them as the default, but you're more than welcome to play around, experiment which patterns or which of the settings you prefer the most. For example, if you want bigger hexagons, you can drag this. You might need to wait for a little bit for it to actually reconstruct the pattern, but you can see that you can have bigger hexagons or even smaller hexagons if you want. Let's use our default, which is 5 over here. The height doesn't really matter. Let's keep it 20 for now. The wall thickness is basically what is the distance of the gap between these hexagons. So obviously, if you make it too small, they might overlap, but I think this tool will stop you from overlapping. Anyway, we'll keep 0.5. If you want them to be wider, you can choose to have a bigger number. Let's keep the default. Now, what's important is that we want to make sure this pattern is bigger than our stencil. So you can see that right now, only 4 of these won't cover the stencil. Right? So we're going to add a few more columns first. So let's make it, say, four columns or 4 across. So if I drag it over here, you can see that, oh, it's pretty good, right? It just covers the width. So let's use 7 here. So that's the number of rows. And then we're going to drag it over here and make sure it covers, right? So that's great. Right now, we don't really see what's underneath or what what's in the pattern. So let's make it a little bit shorter. Let's use 8. It doesn't really matter what number we use. We're gonna drag it on top, and we're gonna change the color to transparent. What it allows us to do is that now we can see, we go back to the top view, we can see roughly how the pattern is going to look like over our stencil, and it is actually going to be how our fancier cover is going to look like. Now, if you look at this view and you don't see the same view as I am, you might be actually looking at it using the perspective view. You can see that there's a little bit of 3D-ness over here, but it's not very helpful for us to align things. So make sure that we have chosen the flat view or the orthographic view, not the perspective view. Right. So this is much more helpful to align things. You can choose the two objects by Shift, and then choose the two objects and our shapes to do some alignments over here. Or if you want to do some, maybe you don't want it to be so centered aligned, you might want to make sure that things like I want the top piece to be quite similar to the bottom piece over here. So I might want to do some manual alignment. So I can press up, down, left, right to do the alignment, or I can just use my mouse to drag around. I might want to also zoom in a little bit to do a little bit more like precise movement at the same time to see things a little better. Let's say I'm happy with this particular alignment with the stencil. So this is roughly going to be my fancier cover is going to look like. Right? So I have these two pieces. The stencil piece, again, is 1.5 millimeter thick. The pattern piece, it doesn't really matter how thick it is, but we want it to be hopefully, it doesn't really matter how thick actually it is, but usually what I want to do is have it thicker. So 8 definitely is thicker than the stencil piece. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to overlap these two in the sense that this will go, the stencil piece is going to go inside my pattern piece. So let's go to the front view. And then we select this, or we can select, either way is fine. We move it so that it overlaps. The stencil piece is completely inside my honeycomb grid pattern piece. Right? So that's why we want it to be a little bit thicker so that it's easier for us to make sure that it's inside. Now, so we go back to the top view, and we're going to highlight these two pieces. If you haven't highlighted the pieces before, we can do a click and drag, and then you can see that the two pieces are being selected over here. Right. What we're going to do next is we're going to do an operation called intersect. So it's similar in the sense that we are combining two pieces together like we created the base piece or the tray piece, but the actual thing that we're going to choose is called intersect. Instead of union, which is default group type or operation, we're going to choose intersect. Then the two pieces are going to be combined in a very specific way. So let me explain. When we choose intersect, what's being kept after the operation are the parts or the bits that are overlap that exist in both shapes. That's why you don't see the excess of the pattern before, because the excess of the pattern did not overlap with your stencil piece. If you zoom in a little bit closer, you can also see that this gap, there's actually gaps for each of these, right? Now, these gaps used to be present in the stencil piece, but it wasn't in the pattern part, the pattern piece. So when we do the intersect, it only exists as one of the parts. Then when we intersect those two pieces together, they will not be kept. So that's how we can use a stencil on a pattern to create this really nice shaped pattern piece over here. All right. So now we have these two pieces. The next step, which is actually the final step, is to fuse these two pieces together to form our fancy cover. So let's go to our front view, and let's make both of these to be touching the work plane. So we can select both of them, or we can highlight them, and then we can click this button on the top right called drop to work plane. So we have both of them touching the bottom, and it's going to help us to align things in terms of height. So if you remember, our plan was we have a 3.5 millimeter fancy cover in total. The thickness 3.5 millimeter. This piece, which is the bottom piece, is 2.5 millimeter high or thick. This piece we just created is 0.5 millimeter thicker than what we have planned. Now, why do we want to do that? So let's bring it up a little bit first. So how much do we want to bring it up? In fact, you want to bring it up by 2 over here. So 2 here. Now, why do you want to bring it by 2? Because what we want is that we want the 0.5 millimeter thickness, or the excess thickness, to be overlapping or intersecting with this bottom piece. So if you highlight these two pieces all together, you can see that the total thickness is actually 3.5. That's because this one is not directly on top of the bottom piece, but instead it's slightly lower and dipping into the bottom piece. Now, if I move to the top view and completely overlap this onto this, you will see it a little bit more clearly over here. So I'm going to make sure that they overlap. I can use the line tool, but I think it's pretty good. I can double check with the 62 above the x-axis, 63 on the right hand side of the y-axis. So that's this piece. When I choose this piece, you see these two numbers do not change, right? So it means that they're completely aligned, right? So the reason why I want to do that, let's go back to our front view. I zoom in a little bit here for you. You can see that there's this little overlapping over here. Now, the reason why I want to do that, and hence the reason why we want to be having a slightly thicker pattern piece instead of just 1 millimeter, is because when I select both of them and I use the union operation, again, union is not intersect. If I choose intersect, the only thing that's left is really that the overlapping part. So I choose the union. You can see that these two pieces fuse very nicely together. Now, if I don't overlap them, chances are they will be fine. But then sometimes when they're that exact, the two pieces are just touching each other. When you use a union and you fuse, in the 3D object model, there might be some weird artifacts, like a little seam or little edge. So I don't want that. So this guarantees that these two parts will fuse into one solid piece, and that's why. So let's go back to our top view, and we can also just do a little bit of eyeball check to see that this actually will be, overlapping this one very nicely, right? Because this whole thing is based on our original plain cover. So nothing has changed. There's no size adjustment. Everything is just like before. We are just using this one. Like I said, if you go to a 3D use, you can now choose this guy and choose export, and you can save it as an STL file, and then you can print this. Like I said, sometimes your 3D printer might be too exact, so that this guy will simply just drop into the tray, but it doesn't friction fit. So you might want to again adjust the height and the width a little bit in the 3D printing software. Maybe add 1 millimeter up to 1 millimeter. Usually even 0.1 millimeter might just fit. So you have to experiment with that little increase in height and width for the piece so that it can friction fit into your tray or your base part. So that is our fancy cover. And it's really cool, right? Now, I want to do one more thing for you before we end today's video. That is, what if you don't want this grid? What if you want something else? So once again, there are different things that you can play with. Another option you can choose is, closing it. Another thing you can use is the keyword pattern. So you can use pattern over here and then press or click search. It will show up like this. So you can have let's show a little more shapes. So we can have a pattern like this one. You can see that it's very nicely tiled. You might want to make some adjustments. Not all of the patterns allows you to choose, the number of repetitions and whatnot. But there are a few things that you can do. Say, for example, you might want it to be the same size of this one. So you want to be 52 by how much? 52 by 28. So let's do say 52, and then we want it to be by, is it 28? Right, so let's go to top view to make it a little bit nicer to see, and we can rotate it so that it is something that looks like this, right? So now we can use the same technique before to combine it with our bottom piece, and then we have a different pattern over here. So make sure that you get the dimensions correct, the height. So this should be, say, start with 8, right? It doesn't really matter, so that it just intersect correctly with the base piece, right? So you might also, this particular pattern, I just realized that there's a little white part over here. I wonder if you can, I don't think you can ungroup it. But anyway, so since it's just a solid rectangular piece, what you can do is that you can say move this guy. So let's say suppose this is your the base piece for the stencil piece. You can just move it so that it overlaps, but not with the white piece. Then when you do the intersect, it will only keep the pattern. So that's exactly what we wanted. So you can ignore the white piece, just only treat this as your columns, and that will work. So that's another pattern that you can try. I'm going to leave it here. Let's see what else. Let's try a few things. So pattern is one word you can use. The other word that you can use is tile. So let's say this tile, the name is very funny. It's called the dinosaur skin tile. So again, there's not much you can play with, but at the very least, you can do a little bit of the size. You want to make sure that it covers your entire fancy cover. So you want this to be sorry about that. It should be 2852. So it's 28 and 52 over here. So again, you can rotate it if you want, or you want to keep a certain pattern, or you can just add. Maybe you don't really like it to be that long, right? So you can make it to be like, say, make it back to 28, and then you can duplicate it, and then you can make it side by side or overlap a little bit. It really depends on how you would like it, and then you can use the same trick like I did before to make the fancy cover. Like for this one, you don't really have columns, so you're just going to fuse this with a stencil piece, and you are good to go. Right. So there are a few other things that you can play with, depending on what you look. Of course, you can also create your own patterns. Say you can line up a bunch of like tubes to make circular patterns, or can draw your own, a bunch of these guys. What is this? A bunch of partial angle tubes. So there are many things that you can play with over here. Some of them allows you to quickly generate. Some of them needs a little bit of work. The last thing I want to do, besides fancy shapes and tiles and patterns, you can also just use words. Let's say you want to create something for someone, and you want to put your name over their name over there. So you can drag this text. Let's just put over here. And let's say, so when you expand it, there are a few things you can play with. Obviously, the text itself. Let's say I want to make myself one with the vector in it, and it is quite big. So we can adjust the size. So let's make it a little smaller over here. Make sure that it fits our stencil or the cover. So let's rotate it to 90 degrees, one way or the other, or you want it to be vertical, it really doesn't matter. So it depends on how you want it to be, right? So let's just make it a little bit higher so we can kind of see the effects, right? So we have this. We can have our height to the right. It's very high right now. So is it really tall? Let's bring it down to just maybe 8 over here. And then make about here. So we can see that it is, what kind of like this. Right, so let me just top view, and then we can move it. That looks fine to me. Maybe I want it to be smaller. It's up to you. Maybe you have a longer name, so you want to make it smaller. You can also use there's only a few options of fonts. Let's say I want the sans font, and then the rest you can play along with it. It just really won't change much about the things, and then you can just make a name or a word to it. Again, the same step is once you set this up, you use the intersect with sorry, this one you should use a union. The reason why is because if you use intersect, what's only left is just the word itself, right? Because all the rest will be gone. So you'll use either a union or use an intersect to create your fancy pattern or fancy cover, depending on what you are using and what you are creating. So there you go. This is how you can create a fancier cover. If you combine with the video we have before, you can create almost any fidget slider toy that you can imagine, right? So it's actually really cool, and there are tons of patterns you can find, or you can create your own. It's really fun to do. So I hope you're having fun doing this, and make some for your friends. And again, in the comments, let me know how it turns out. If you like this video, again, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And thank you for your attention. And I hope to make another video for you soon. Goodbye.